Today I wanted to share some books that I absolutely loved that I read before I started making booktube videos. Most of these I don't think I've talked about on my channel. However, now I'm looking at them and remembering that I did reread one of these since starting my channel, but I definitely found it way before booktube. But anyway, now this isn't going to include any classics that I read and loved before I started my channel, like no Jane Austen or no Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre or any of that stuff. But keep in mind that I definitely love those as well. So maybe I should make a separate video, although I think I do have a video on some of my favorite classics. Anyway, let's just get started. The first one is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. So this is the first book in the Wayfarer series. It follows the space crew on the Wayfarer ship. This crew has the job of tunneling wormholes across the galaxy to reach this distant planet. It basically is a slow-moving, character-driven story where you learn a whole lot about the cast of characters that are on this ship. They're all different alien species, and they are just so interesting. Their lives and their friendships and learning about this space crew is just so much fun. There's not a ton of like super spacey talk in here. I think that this will appeal to all different kind of readers. If you're not big into science fiction, I don't think that you should let that hold you back from giving this one a try. It's just a really fun book. Now, I read this several years ago, and I have wanted to read the second one for ever since I finished this one, and I bought it almost immediately, but I had heard that it is quite different from this one, and so I sort of put it off because I loved this one so much that I was sort of scared that I wouldn't love the second one as much, and I hate being let down by the second book, but I'm hoping to get to that second one soon. It's actually on my August TBR. I haven't gotten to it yet, but fingers crossed. Next is a couple that I have mentioned on my channel because I did reread these. I think I've reread this one twice since starting my channel, but they're both by Shannon Hill, and they are Austenland and Midnight in Austenland. My most favorite book of all time is Pride and Prejudice, and then I think my most favorite contemporary book of all time is Austenland, just based on the sheer amount of times that I have reread this book. And this book also has a movie based on it, and I have watched that movie so many times. I've watched it 3 times this week. Isn't that crazy? I'm just a little bit obsessed. So basically this book follows a woman named Jane who is obsessed with Pride and Prejudice. She specifically loves the BBC version of Pride and Prejudice, the one with Colin Firth, and all of her in real life relationships just never seem to work up to what her ideal is. Well, her great aunt ends up passing away, and her aunt knows about this obsession, and so she leaves her this vacation to go to Austenland, which is this place in England that essentially you go for like 3 weeks and you dress up in the Regency clothes, you do the Regency manners, the Regency talk, and you just pretend like you're in the Regency period for those 3 weeks. And all of the people who go there, they're promised like a romance or whatever. You're not supposed to like touch or kiss or anything like that. It's very just like manner driven, like in Pride and Prejudice. There's a ball at the end, all that stuff. And so this just follows Jane on her journey in Austenland and everything that happens there. I just love this book so much. I can't even explain how much I love it. It's just so much fun for me. Midnight in Austenland is sort of the sequel. I definitely think that both books stand on their own. It's just that they are both set in Austenland. This one follows a different woman. Her name is Charlotte, and she is going to Austenland for her own vacation. Her circumstances are a little bit different. She is older. I feel like she's like 41, but I could be wrong. And she's divorced. She has 2 children, and so she's going here to sort of take a break and recenter herself after her divorce. And this one has a bit of a mystery in it. I don't like this one quite as much as Austenland, but it's still really good. And I feel like these books, they have a little bit of each of the Jane Austen novels in them. I would say that this one is more reflective of Northanger Abbey. It's not like a actual retelling of Northanger Abbey. It just has sort of that flair. And then in Austenland, the different characters, there are, you know, other visitors there, and they have their romances, and like each one of the romances sort of reflects different romances from the different Jane Austen books. Definitely check this out if you are a Jane Austen fan, and it's a lot of fun to sort of read through it and pick out which Jane Austen romance each one of the couples is supposed to be based on. Then I have Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So this one is following the aftermath of a pandemic that swept across the whole entire world. It's sort of like a flu pandemic, and now after everything has happened, I think it's like 20 years later, you're following this acting troupe as they're like a traveling acting troupe that stops along in different settlements and, you know, does performances for them. And through different flashbacks, you get to see how the pandemic went down. So you get to see things that happened back in the past, as well as things that are happening 20 years after everything has happened. I would love to go back and reread this and see how I would feel about it now as we are going through the coronavirus. It might be a little bit too close to home, but I remember when I read this several years ago that I absolutely loved it. I thought that it was really well written and just such an interesting, thought-provoking read with lots of different characters that I can follow along with. Okay, then next I have a trilogy that is called the Mark of the Lion trilogy, and this is by Francine Rivers. Now this one is a Christian fiction series. It's been a while since I've read these, but in my memory, I feel like this is something that would appeal to people who, you know, aren't Christian as well. This is taking place during the Jerusalem Roman War, and it's following the main character whose name is Hadassah, and she is like a Jewish slave, and you're following her journey from having to leave her home and to be sold into slavery. And there's a lot of violence in these books, but basically it's just Hadassah's journey, and there is a super duper amazing romance in these books as well, which I absolutely fell in love with both of the main characters and the romance and everything that happened in here. I really need to reread these because I remember loving these so much. The second book continues on with Hadassah's journey, and then the third book in the series, As Sure as the Dawn, is sort of like a companion book, I would say, in the trilogy, because this one follows a different character, Hadassah and Marcus, who is the main male in the first two. They are not in the third book, but this character was like just sort of a side character in the first two. So I would definitely recommend these first two books for sure. You don't have to read the third one, I don't think, to get the full story, but if you enjoy these, then you might want to pick up this one as well. I just remember these being so super inspirational. Hadassah just goes through so much, and she has definitely hard times, but she just has so much hope and so much faith, and she's such a strong character, and her journey was just so amazing. And the character growth that Marcus goes through and this duology is amazing as well, and I just love both of them. So yeah, I would love to know if you have read these, specifically if you've read them more recently, if you think they stand the test of time. Because these were originally published in the 90s, so they have been out for a while. Okay, then I have The Unicorn in the Barn by Jacqueline K. Ogborn and illustrated by Rebecca Green. So this is a middle grade novel that follows a young boy named Eric. In the book, he spots a unicorn in the woods and he wants to take care of it. He has a neighbor who is a veterinarian that he ends up getting to know really well throughout the story, and you get to see just the sweetest story about Eric, as well just his love for animals and his desire to want to care for animals. There's a beautiful relationship in here between Eric and his grandmother that is just so heartwarming. The book has such beautiful illustrations in it. They aren't on every page, and of course they're like at the start of the chapters, and then there's at least one illustration, I think, in each chapter. But it's just so much fun and so sweet, so heartwarming. It's really well written. My kids all love this book, and yeah, it's definitely worth a read. Then I have Vicious, which I'm sure most of you have already heard about. This is by V. Schwab. This book I remember pretty well because I read it during a really hard time, and so it's just been one that sort of stuck with me. But it follows two characters who are best friends during college. They want to figure out how to become superheroes or to develop superpowers, and they do figure it out. Then you're following them many years later as they both are trying to figure out how to deal with these things. They both have very different ideas about how people with superpowers should be treated, how what they should use those powers for, if they're good or if they're evil people. Their names are Victor and Eli, and Victor and Eli are both very gray characters. You're never quite sure. Well, I mean, I was pretty sure who I was rooting for. I mean, I don't know. You tell me if you've read this. I was definitely rooting for Victor the whole entire time, but Victor is definitely a gray character. You know, he's not really a good guy per se, but I was definitely rooting for him throughout the story. And I just felt that this was very unique when I read it, and I'd never read anything else like this. And I just loved the story and the plot. I thought it was a very page-turning novel. And this is another one that I put off the sequel because I just loved this book so much. It was just so unique to me that I'm scared the second one might not live up to the story. But I put it on my August TBR, so we'll see if I get to it or not. Okay, then I have The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This one is a contemporary romance. It's an office romance, a hate to love romance. It's following these two different characters who work in the same office, and they are both like assistants to joint CEOs. So it's like this company, these two companies have like joined together, and they both kept their CEOs, so they both kept their assistants, and they have to work in the same little office area together, always, you know, glaring at each other and having this little competition between each other. Their names are Lucy and Josh, and it's just, I don't know, this book was probably one of the first like hate to love books that I ever read, and I just loved it so much. I loved their banter, I loved their back and forth, I loved their chemistry, I loved the tension between the two of them. You know, when they first kiss, there's just so much magic there. I don't know what it is about this book, but it was just like candy to me, and I gobbled it up. Now, I know this is another one that a lot of people talk about on Booktube even now, and I think it's definitely for a reason that this is just a really great book. Then I have The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. So this one is following a young woman who believes that her family's past, some secrets in her family's past may be connected to Vlad the Impaler, and she is doing a ton of different research on her family and on Vlad the Impaler, and some like word of mouth stories that have been told, and she is also joined by another like scholar on this journey to piece together all of these clues. They go to Eastern Europe, and they do like a lot of investigating over there. And it was so much fun. This book was so engrossing. There was so much in here to learn about, and I just love stories about Vlad the Impaler and Dracula and that sort of lore, and to see this through more of like a academia standpoint was really interesting, and I just ate this up. I just felt like this was really a book that you can sink into and just spend your time reveling in the beautifulness of the scenario and all of the research that they do throughout this book. It was just a wonderful time. I just love this book so much. So yeah, let me know if you've read this one as well. Okay, then another one that I'm sure that you've probably already heard of, but I can't not mention The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This one follows two different competing magicians who have been raised for this competition basically their whole lives by their individual instructors. It's like they've always known that they're going to have to compete against each other, but they've never really known each other. This book is just so atmospheric. The writing was wonderful. The character development was beautiful. The setting of the circus was just everything. I love books set in circuses. It was just a lot of fun and sort of unlike anything that I had ever read at this point. And I did read Erin Morgenstern's most recent book, The Starless Sea, and I did not enjoy it near as much as this book. For me, this book is definitely a standout between the two, but I will read whatever she puts out next. I believe that she is incredibly creative. Her world building is so unique, and her stories are just so luscious. I don't know how else to describe them. They're just beautiful. So yeah, definitely read this one if you haven't already. Then I have another trilogy called, I think this is just called the Dragon Slippers trilogy, but I'm not sure. The first one is Dragon Slippers, and these are by Jessica Day George. So we have Dragon Slippers, Dragon Spear, and Dragon Flight. And these follow a young woman named Krill, and she has, so there's a dragon that lives on the outskirts of her village, and her aunt decides to sacrifice Krill to the dragon, but Krill doesn't want to give up, and so she strikes a bargain with the dragon, and she strikes out on her own. She also wins these pair of blue slippers in the bargain as well, and she heads off to the King's City, where she ends up meeting another dragon, and they become friends, and a whole lot of things happen in the King's City. She discovers more and more about dragons and the world that she is living in, and she discovers that her slippers have like magical properties. It's just a beautiful, fun, whimsical story that involves dragons and magic and princesses and princes and fair maidens and all that kind of thing. But these were just so much fun. I definitely recommend these. I would say that they are on the upper end of middle grade or the lower end of YA. I think that Jessica Day George's writing is like really easily consumable. It's really easy to gobble up, and she has written some other middle grade stories that I haven't picked up yet, but I would definitely be interested in reading more by her. Then I have the Wolf by Wolf duology, which includes Wolf by Wolf and Blood for Blood, and then there was a 1.5 novella in between these two called Iron for Iron, or Iron to Iron. I think maybe it was Iron to Iron. Yeah, so these are by Ryan Groudon, and these are like an alternate history duology. They follow, so basically the premise behind these is if Hitler had not lost the war, what the world would look like. And in this world, every year there is like this big motorcycle race sort of in celebration of Hitler and his winning the war. This book follows Yael, who is a former death camp prisoner, and she wants to rebel against Hitler, and so she enters this motorcycle race with the goal of reaching the end and killing Hitler at the end, because at the end the winner gets to go to like this big banquet or ball where Hitler is. And so this book is basically just following the big motorcycle race across the country, and you get to see lots of flashbacks of her life and what her life was like in the prison camps. And so so these, even though they have flashbacks to things that really happened, obviously it's an alternate thing, and I don't want to give away too much, but these are definitely like a thrill ride. I remember my heart beating so fast during this book, especially at the end. I mean, it is just bam, 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 a page turner. It was just so interesting and so just heart racing for me. And the second book was just as good. It definitely is one that you have to read in order to get the conclusion. This one does not stand on its own in my opinion. But yeah, these are fantastic. There's also a little bit of a romance in these, which I loved, and these are another one that I have bought for other friends and family members because I just think they're so great. Okay, then I have another romance, and this is Edenbrook by Julian Donaldson. Now, I have read Blackmore by Julian Donaldson since I've started my channel, but this is one that I read a couple years before starting my channel. This one is part of the Proper Romance line by Shadow Mountain Publishing. They have tons of books in this Proper Romance line, so if you're ever interested in something like that, like a Regency romance that has very minimal kissing and no sex scenes, then I would definitely check them out. This one follows Marianne, and she is in Bath at the beginning of this novel, and she is being pursued by a suitor that she has no interest in. So when her twin sister invites her to the country to come to like a country house party at Edenbrook, yes, at Edenbrook, she jumps at the chance to escape Bath and this unwanted suitor, and she hopes that things are just going to be really calm at Edenbrook. But of course, they're not. Lots of stuff happens along the way, and this was just a really sweet, cute, heartwarming romance. It has, you know, all the Regency vibes in it. It's just one that you can really cozy up to and just enjoy a fun Regency romp. There is some drama and some angst in here, but like I said, there's minimal kissing. It's more of like a slow burn, tension-filled romance instead of like, there's no sex in here at all. So definitely check out Julian Donaldson. I love both of the books that I've read by her, and I would love it if she would write more things, and I'm looking forward to trying out more of the proper romance line of books that Shadow Mountain Publishing does. The last ones I have to recommend is a trilogy that I think I would say is in the upper end of middle grade, maybe the lower end of YA. This is the Grimm Legacy trilogy, and these are all written by Polly Shulman. So we have the Grimm Legacy, the Wells Bequest, and the Poe Estate. So this first book follows Elizabeth, who has just started working at the New York Circulating Material Repository, which is basically a library for like fairy tale objects. So all of the objects that occur in different fantasy stories are real, and they all are here in this branch of the library. And so she has become like a page, which is her job to help people check out these objects. And it's just this wonderful fairy tale-esque story. It talks a lot about other books and fairy tales in here, and you get to see all of these magical objects, and she even uses some of them and goes on like a great adventure. It was just so much fun, and I loved this book so much. It was definitely a page turner for me. And then the other two follow different characters. Like Elizabeth is older in these. She does appear in this book, but she's not as prevalent. She's not the main character. This one, obviously, the Wells Bequest, is dealing with the time machine with that novel. So it's along those lines. So if you're into like time travel in a more middle grade setting, definitely check this one out. And then the Poe Estate, which obviously is going to have a lot to do with Edgar Allan Poe. So yeah, these are a lot of fun. If you're really into like books about books, then I would definitely check these out. And yeah, these are the only things I've read by Polly Shulman, but I would love to read more by her. I thought that she had a really fun writing style. So those are just some of my favorite books that I read before starting Booktube. Let me know if you have read any of these and if you enjoyed them, what your thoughts were on them. Do you agree with me or disagree? I would love to hear some of your favorite backlist titles, because as we know, I'm always looking to add more stuff to my TBR. I mean, you know, am I ever going to get through my TBR? Probably not, because I love to reread books, and all of these, just talking about them today, made me want to go back and reread all of these, even though I have a million books on my TBR to read. As always, I'd love it if you would follow me on Instagram and Goodreads so that I can keep up with what you are reading and you can see what I'm reading as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are all doing well. I'll see you next time.